Hey everybody, this is Peter with Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to be taking another look at Coriolis, the Third Horizon by Free League Publishing, and that is because our last video was focused on the core rulebook for Coriolis, the Third Horizon, and today we're going to be looking at the grand epic scale campaign that Free League Publishing has been working on over the last few years, really, quite a few years. The first book that they released, and I say first because there's three, the first book they released was Coriolis, Mercy of the Icons Part 1, Emissary Lost. This is over 200 pages of adventure for you to run for your players. But a couple years later, they released Coriolis, Mercy of the Icons Part 2, The Last Cyclade, carrying on that campaign and this huge story that they're working on. And then they released just this year, 2023, Coriolis, Mercy of the Icons Part 3, Wake of the Icons. Each one of these books is over 200 pages long and contain multiple scenarios that are going to tell this huge overarching story for you and your players. So what we're going to do today is I'm not going to get into the story that's taking place. I don't want to do spoilers, and if I was going to talk about the story itself, it would be a massively long video. And so to avoid that, what we're going to be focusing on is for the game masters, what these books look like in layout and structure, and how they would go ahead and help you then run this game if you're interested in running a big epic scale sci-fi campaign for your players. So we're going to go to the PDF versions that Free League sent us, as well as those hardcover versions there, and we're going to take a look at that structure and hopefully pique your interest into running this game for your players. So let's head on over to the computer and let's see what this game is all about. All right, everybody, here we are at the computer now with Coriolis, Mercy of the Icons by Free League Publishing. This is their huge epic scale campaign adventure that they have been publishing over the last few years for Coriolis the game. And they've released it in 3 parts. Part 1, Emissary Lost. Part 2, The Last Cyclade. And Part 3, which just came out this year in 2023, Wake of the Icons. Again, if you are somebody who has already been running Coriolis, you've heard about this, because this is the #1 thing that they've been releasing for the game. So they released the core rulebook, and they have released one individual like paperback prequel to this trilogy. But when it comes to hardcovers, this has been their focus for Coriolis, and they've been building this beautiful epic for you to run for your players. So if you have been playing it, fantastic. You don't really need to watch this video probably, but if you're just now checking into Coriolis and you want to know how has Free League Publishing been supporting this grand sci-fi adventure game, then this is your answer. It is, again, a 3-part series of grand adventures. So what I'm going to do here in this video is mostly just talk about what it is that they have done for you as a game master. Free League Publishing has created a huge scale campaign for you to run. Each one of these books is a little over 200 pages long, and each one is broken down into at least 2 to 3 scenarios. Coriolis plays very, I would say, cinematic. If you know their game Alien, the RPG, then you know that they have done that game very movie style, because again, it's based off of a movie series, so it makes sense that they did that. Well, Coriolis is somewhat the same. They've designed the game to be played in acts, and within those acts there are scenes. So the actual act of traveling in between scenes is not usually very focused on. It's the actual scenes that things are happening, so they jump to the action. I know a lot of RPGs sometimes will try to fill in the whole traveling thing and make that its own little game or its own little adventure, and Free League has done that as well with some of their other games. Coriolis isn't really so much focused on that. They're more focused on the actual scenes where all of the action is taking place. And so your player characters are going to be interacting with some very specific things. And again, as the game master, it is up to you how you want to lay those things out for your players. Maybe you want to put one scene in front of the other, but they have gone to great detail to design a very far-reaching campaign here that's very cinematic in scope, and it's going to have your PCs traveling throughout the Third Horizon, this conglomeration of star systems, and there's going to be a lot of political intrigue as well. So if you're wanting to run a sci-fi adventure that focuses on really action-packed scenarios, high-level stakes, and involves, you know, some pretty epic ship combat, as well as some really good role-playing opportunities, but then also just some really cool situations, and again, the whole political intrigue thing, a lot of machinations happening in the background, then Coriolis Mercy of the Icons is going to be for you. But I'm letting you know now, especially since I'm coming into this late in the game where all 3 books are already out, it can be a bit daunting to kind of try to grasp. So what I'm going to do for you today is I'm just going to pull up these books, and I'm going to look through a little bit of information from them, just at least so you can see how they've laid out the information in the books. I'm not going to get into too many spoilers, hopefully, because this video it would be so long if I was going to get into everything that is happening inside this game. Mostly I'm wanting to pique your interest, hopefully. If you're a sci-fi fan, if you love running RPGs, I want to pique your interest in this game by telling you a little bit about these 3 books. So we're going to go ahead and dive in just a little bit. I'm going to try to keep the video as short as I can, but again, at the same time, give you some information to intrigue you to possibly go and check this out yourself at freelypublishing.com. So Mercy of the Icon starts with Part 1, The Emissary Lost, and the big thing to understand about this game, they give you here at the very beginning with the introduction. And so this is going to give you all the information, not all the information, there is some information that they will point you to in the core book with the lore of the world, with the Third Horizon and everything that is going on there. But in a nutshell, the world, this is way far off into the future, and we have a couple of ships that have left Earth, and they are going to be traveling through space to this Third Horizon, this set of star systems where they have found habitable planets, and they're going to travel out there, and it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of years to get there. Some of the people obviously dying on the way, as future generations will be the ones who arrive at this location called the Third Horizon. And so they go out and they get there, and they find out when they get there that they're not actually the first humans arriving there. There's actually been some humans there for quite some time, and there's already been like the ebb and flow of time, and a lot of people have built places and they've crumbled, and so you've got your ruins and everything like you normally do in these types of games. But you have a people group that is there and kind of all disparate and separated. So it's just a really cool idea. And so the new people who arrive are a little bit more technologically advanced, and so they quickly insert themselves and try to start pulling together these star systems once again. And they have Coriolis, which is this central station where they form a committee of sorts and get everybody together. And that's where you're at. You are part of this star system. Now, there is a first horizon and a second horizon, but these are places that during during a portal war years and years ago, have been cut off. And so it's in the distant past that these people had connection with the first and second horizon and no longer do. So that's, I mean, that is just like the very basis of a nutshell for this game. But your PCs are here in the world, and they're going to be commanding their own ship and their own crew, and they're going to be interacting with all of the higher level political intrigue that is going on in the world. So recently, in the more recent past of this world, certain people who are now being called mystics have started to show powers. And these people, these mystics, have been seen with suspicion because of these strange powers that they have started to show. And so there have been hate crimes against them. People are suspicious of them. And if some of your players may even be playing as people with these mystic powers. But mystics have started to vanish and disappear. And so this whole thing begins with your player characters looking into the disappearance of these mystics, as well as an emissary who is also absconded with. So there's just a whole lot of stuff happening, but I guess that's just kind of like the basics of where this game begins. Now, as a game master, it's a lot of reading. Gonna be totally upfront with you on that, but again, you're not gonna start with all three of these books all at once. You can just pick up the first book if you would like to, but there are 3 books here, and they are all going to be telling this one long overarching story that builds on one another, which is fantastic. But here in the first book, I just want to show you kind of the idea that they have, the layout of how they have made this, so that you understand that it is, even though it is large and it has a whole lot for the game master to read and to prepare, it's also broken down then into smaller bite-sized chunks for running for your players. So I do think that there's a lot of front end for the game master with this game, and specifically with this campaign, but it has the potential to be a freaking awesome campaign. So here is the main part in the first book for the game master at the beginning here, tips. So it lets you know that the campaign is structured as a classic RPG epic, and again, you have these very tailor-made scenarios, and each of these scenarios have acts that break them down, usually 2 to 3 acts, and each act is broken then down into scenes. This specific book, the first book, is broken down into 3 scenarios. Each scenario is broken then down into 2 to 3 acts, and each act is broken down into scenes. And so, depending on how long of a game session you think you and your players are going to have, more than likely, hopefully, you'll be able to do 1 act per game session. So an entire scenario that you're playing through might take you 2 to 3 sessions, possibly more if you can only get a certain amount of scenes in per session. So you have scenarios broken down into acts, and each acts are broken down into scenes. So to give you an example of that, we have The Wake of the Martyr, and we are given an introduction to this scenario, and it shows you here at the beginning of the scenario, and this happens for each of your scenarios, it shows you an overview breaking the game down into its acts. So we get an overview for this very first scenario, The Wake of the Martyr. It is broken down into 3 separate acts. Again, I didn't say this earlier, but if you're going to be playing through the game, you might not want to watch for spoiler purposes, but I'm also not going to try to give too many spoilers that would ruin it for you. But this is really for the game masters to be watching. So Act 1 is called the Mysticides. And this is the point at which your player characters are finding out that the mystics are being taken and absconded with, and one of these mystics is going to be somehow tied in with your PCs. This is going to be somebody that they know and give them a reason to want to go ahead and start looking for the mystics. Then we have Act 2, High Stakes, and then Act 3, The Abyss. And so again, the way that they break this down is that you're focusing on some pretty action-focused scenes, and so there's not always the fact that you're going to see them travel between the acts. It's just kind of it can jump between scenes. Now, if you want to add that travel aspect into it, I'm sure you absolutely can if you want to. It also then, after it shows you the overview and the acts that are going to be taking place in this scenario, you get a focus on the different factions and the groups that are a big part of this scenario. So here we have the Order of the Pariah, and we have the Martyr Strike Team, the Samaritans, the Zenithian Hegemony, the Asterbon, the Judicators, the Consortium, Nazarene Sacrifice, and the Emissaries. And so you can see already, just breaking down this one scenario, we have 4 pages of information for the Game Master to kind of understand what all is happening and how it all ties together. And the book will every once in a while point you towards the core rule book, which is going to give you some more information about the lore. So if you're somebody who's going to be running this, they do have a lot of information for you to be reading and understanding so that you can lay it out for your players well. So next we'll go ahead and jump a little bit forward here as well and look at one of the acts that are in this scenario. So we have the Mystics. Again, the beginning of the act just opens with an overview for the Game Master, again, to understand exactly what's going to be happening in this one act. And it begins to give you some key insights into what are the big things that you really want to make sure happen for your players so that they gain all the knowledge that they need. This is very much a mystery scenario, and they're going to be investigating. So it breaks down the key insights that you want your players to get. It also gives you some important NPCs that your PCs are going to be interacting with, as well as, and I like this, it gives you information about the darkness points. So having done a previous review on the core rulebook, darkness points are points that the Game Master receives in order to turn in to do things that are going to obstruct or cause challenges for the player characters. This is kind of the big back and forth between the Game Master and the player characters. When the player characters roll dice, they have the ability to re-roll, and every time they re-roll, they're giving a darkness point to the Game Master. There are also abilities that some of the players have that when they use those abilities throughout the game, give the Game Master darkness points. So at the beginning of each of these acts, they have a little block here for darkness points telling the Game Master what they are to do or can do with those darkness points. Specifically here it says, in this act, darkness points can be used to make key situations tougher, but you should go easy on the PCs until they have found their direction in the story. As usual, you start with as many darkness points as there are PCs. So again, that lets you know that you do start the game already with some darkness points depending on how many players you have at your table. And then the scenario starts with a starting scene. It breaks down the situation for you, giving you all of your key important facts for you to have for your players. And again, there are a lot of these nice off to the side blurbs that are going to help you as a Game Master as well. But it's going to give you, again, the NPCs and the locations where each of these scenes are going to be taking place. And then you get some really nice, well laid out maps for some of the very important locations where the scenes are taking place. Now, these maps are not big enough that you're just going to lay it down at the table and run with it. You are going to need to transpose it in some way, whether you're playing online or you're playing in person, but you'll end up transposing that probably onto some kind of gridded paper If not paper, then maybe you've got some other wonderful resources for your table. Each of the main NPCs that your player characters are going to be running into are given stat blocks that you'll be utilizing as well when it comes to the combat of the game. And then you will finish up that scenario and move on to the next scenario, which will also have more maps for each of the, again, the big locations that you're running your players through. Now you can see I've already been going forward quite a bit, because not until we reach page 36 do we get to the last scene of the first act. So we had somewhere around 20 pages just for the first act of this scenario. So it's a lot of information and it's a lot of playtime. So I think more than likely you're gonna possibly be able to make your way through an act if you have a good 4 to 6 hour game session. But if you're playing in less than that, then you're gonna want to break your you're gonna be playing through more scenes rather than acts. And I can't imagine anybody playing a long enough game session to play through an entire scenario in a single play session, but I'm sure there are some of you out there who like to play for really, really long game sessions. But that will end Act 1, and at the end of the act, it does, again, give you the things that your player characters should have learned by the end of this first act. So just by flipping through that, you can see how they have laid out your information, and you see it again here at the beginning of Act 2. You get an overview, you get your key insights, your important characters, and then what the Game Master can do with their darkness points. This one here, Act 2, can mainly be used to put obstacles in the PC's way. When the emissary disappears at the end of Act 1, the Game Master automatically gets 4 darkness points. For increased dramatic effect, you can take these 4 points as you subject a Mystic PC to a Sudden Song event. So if we look at that and see what that's all about. So lots of really good information. I do like the way that it is laid out. For a game that has this much information for the Game Master to digest, they do a nice job of formatting it in a way that you can digest it. So, but again, this is huge. It is massive and a little daunting. But having read through this, it's a really, really cool adventure that they have put together, a really cool campaign that they've put together for you and your players, because it involves so much that is happening. There are schemes for these different factions, and I think the hard part is going to be to remember who all has people in the different factions, because everyone's got spies and everyone is doing their own little bit of machinations, and so there's just there's a lot happening. Now, beyond all of that information, there's just some really fantastic sci-fi art throughout these books as well, this being one of my favorite pieces. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Free League Publishing always fills their books with very intriguing and idea-forming works of art, and this series is no different. So that was going to be kind of my focus for the video, was just to show you how they break down the scenarios that they're giving you here in these 3 books. So again, you can see that a bit here in this introduction. They're going to break down each scenario into usually 2 to 3 acts, and each act is broken down into 2 to 3, maybe even 4 scenes that you'll be running the players through. Now, at the end of this book, after the 2 scenarios that they give you, they also give you some information about the aftermath, and they give you a mission generator, which is going to allow you as the Game Master to create more missions for your player characters to go on if you don't feel like you've had enough possibility here. Plus, again, the idea is they had only released this 1 book, and so they wanted to give everybody a way of continuing their game once they had finished through these first 2 scenarios. But now that we are coming into the game at the point that we are, there's already the last Cyclade, like I mentioned, as well, and then the Wake of the Icons. You're going to be going, and your players are going to be going from, again, a very small focus of some of these mystics are disappearing off of the Coriolis space station, to all of a sudden fighting in spaceship fights and wars that are changing the world. And the entire third horizon is going to be going through a kind of a cataclysmic event that your player characters are going to be playing through. So that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this video. Each one of these books, like I said, again, a little over 200 pages. They have 2 to 3 scenarios each one being broken down into their respective acts, and then finishing with an epilogue, which gives you the aftermath of the adventure itself. If I were to do a video on each one of these books, talking about the actual campaign itself, one, it would be a ton of spoilers, and honestly, there's just so much information in these books for the adventure itself that I can't imagine that I'd be able to fit it into anything less than a couple of hours. But I just wanted to give you this overview of the 3 books, the scenarios again that they have, and it blows my mind the detail that Free League Publishing has put together in this campaign. If you were to run all 3 of these books, I imagine you and your players are going to be playing for quite a long time. I know my group only is able to get together like once a month, so we would be playing through this campaign for well over a year for sure. Alright, so if you're somebody who has already run some of Coriolis, Mercy of the Icons, or any Coriolis at all, I'd love for you to comment in the comment section below this video. Tell me your stories. Tell me some of the experiences that you and your player characters have had, what you're thinking about the game. I'm excited to eventually run this for my players as well. I don't know if I'll start specifically with this trilogy because it is so huge. But there is also a smaller kind of starter adventure that is a prequel to this series that I'm going to do a video on as well. I would maybe start with that just to be a little bit of an easier introduction for myself as the game master, as well as hopefully an easier introduction for my players. It's more of a kind of a one-shot that does not continue on, but it is pertinent to this trilogy as well. So I think I would probably start with that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Coriolis. Thanks for watching. If you are intrigued, head on over to freeleaguepublishing.com. Check out this game. Maybe get yourself a copy if you don't have one already. You can also go to tabletopgamingguild.com, learn a little bit more about us. And until we talk again, everybody, thanks for watching and keep on playing games.